Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
If the Democrats want a deal that's going to solve problems, actually do what they say they care about, is securing, having border security and dealing with the immigration problems that we have in this country for folks who are here illegally. There's a deal to be done here. The question is whether they have the political courage to give the president a pittance, a few $1 billion out of this larger package to meet a political need of his.
Joe, did you hear last night a willingness to compromise?
No, I think the president just restated where he was, which is if I don't get my wall, I'm not going to reopen the government. I'm going to take my ball and no one gets to play.
Should Democrats give, as what Rick Santorum just called, a pittance for the wall?
I think there's more than a pittance here. There's a border security. I agree with the senator that we need to look at this as a broader border security. But the president didn't say anything about DACA, didn't say anything about Dreamers. That's where the deal is. There was nothing there. And in fact, while he may have identified a humanitarian crisis that he helped create by separating families, most of that speech was about Trump vintage 2015, demonizing immigrants. He spent roughly a quarter of the speech detailing horrific acts that immigrants to this country have committed, when all of the statistics show that the immigrant crime rate is lower than native-born Americans. So it was a squandered opportunity. He convinced no one in the public. The real question is he able to hold Senate Republicans? They're starting to fall one by one.
What about that, Rick? What about that today? That Senate Republicans seem quite uncomfortable with how long the government shutdown has.
No, look, I think that's a red herring. There's not going to be 13 Republicans in the United States Senate who are going to abandon the president on this issue. You can pick 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe he gets as high as 7 or 8 or 9. But there isn't going to be 13 Republicans. That's a red herring issue. And the fact that the president talked about the consequences of illegal immigrants in this country committing crimes, Joe, with all due respect, you can say, well, it's a smaller percentage. They shouldn't be here. What we're talking about are people who are illegally in this country, and they should not be here, and they are doing these things. So don't brush this off, Joe. I think it's really unfair to the families affected who say, look, these people are here unjustifiably. They're here illegally. Yeah. This should not have happened.
But how
it's
does a wall,
not like other immigrants who are here illegally.
Understood. But how does a wall stop the heroin trade?
Well, look, the wall is part. I would say. Does it help on the margins? Maybe a little bit. You're right. The heroin comes through ports of entry. I understand
the research
that.
just suggests that it comes through ports of entry, through tractor trailers and passenger vehicles. It doesn't come. People who are climbing over a fence are not lugging heroin with them.
Allison, here's what I know. Every border security agent that I'm here and Homeland Security person that is interviewed says that border security fencing and walls are an important part of an integrated plan to secure the border. And we have almost 700 miles of fence, and it has worked. It has dramatically reduced a lot of crime and a lot of immigration.
And shore it up.
So it's part of it.
This is the point. Is that Democrats, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, Democrats have given money to shore up that fencing that works.
They have, and Republicans voted.
So why are they opposing it?
Because let me make my point. Republicans voted 100 to nothing, in the Senate to go forward with this. This is about politics. And Senator, with all due respect, if you're worried about these cases that the president mentioned yesterday, let's deal with the real national emergency, which is gun violence. On the floor of the United States House yesterday, you saw Steve Scalise and Gabby Giffords hug, both of them victim of gun violence. So I don't think the American public needs a lecture from you or from the president on what the problem is. There is not a crisis at the border. We have 4 times as many border agents than in 2000. We have about 80% less people coming over. It's a manufactured crisis.
It is Thursday, the 10th of January of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Well, I got through another day, and I'm gonna get through some more days. Not easy, but thank you, folks, for being out there and giving me this support. I've mentioned before that I've usually single-handed my grief in the wild seas of whatever, but I didn't have a shore-to-shore phone or a boat-to-shore phone, and this little endeavor plus social media makes it a lot easier. It's almost as if I'm not single-handedly navigating my grief. So there you go. Hey, big news in the world today. Of course, Trump is still being Trump. He watches MSNBC now, and he was watching Lawrence. Wow, that's that makes me laugh. But wow, I guess he needs to figure out the tenor of the opposition. And speaking of which, isn't it weird how we Democrats, and I presume that most of the people listening out there are Democrats or have Democratic leanings, really are classified as the other, and a frightening, scary other, as if we are the true enemy. I wonder what playbook that comes out of. I wonder if it's not out of a playbook originated by, Vlad. He utilized it quite well. And I don't know if it's only me, because I've seen like Natasha Bertrand and Sarah Kendzior speak about this. But, each and every one of these elements, from packing the courts, I know the packing of the courts had occurred way before, but it's all part of a whole. Okay, just bear with me here. The packing of the courts, the appointments in the cabinet and throughout the whole body of of government, to even a shutdown of government, is eerily similar, almost in steps, with what Vlad did when he decided, I'm the power now, and I will be the only power now. And that's the way, the borscht spills. What else is out there? Well, sowing division among all of us, leading evangelical group is petitioning to get gays and LGBTQ types off of the anti-lynching bill so that they can be lynched. Weird. And they're out there in the open saying this, like they can get away with it. Maybe because they are. Well, that's going to stop. And the more I think about it, maybe we do need something similar to the re-education camps. Maybe not as severe as what occurred during, the Cultural Revolution in a country that should be unnamed, but it is China. It won't be as severe as that. But I think that some sort of re-educating needs to take place. Of course, my assessment about that argument before is that you can't re-educate someone if they haven't been educated in the first place. You have to educate them first, and then you can re-educate them. And I'm not telling you that because they haven't been educated that it's just a blank slate. No, that slate's filled up. It's just not educated. So, because when you have Trumpanistas, who also happen to be border patrol types, say that I'm suffering, and it's because Trump is not punishing the people who need to be punished, I think we have a terrible problem here now, don't we? That person is not only talking about fellow Americans, which I know in our construct is important enough. In fact, the most important. I don't know, call me, without borders. But we're also talking about our fellow human beings. I know they don't look at anything other than themselves as human beings, but still, the facts are the facts. What's on the rest of the menu here today? In the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, well, of course, at the top, that was Rick Santorum. Saying that Democrats need political courage to build the wall. I guess it would take political courage. Some people would say it would be capitulation. But he only says that because the GOP and the Republicans really are too busy grooving on the rubles. And the rubles buy the rubble. And property is always more valuable when delivered vacant. I'm going to keep using that until some people are actually in jail. And I don't mean, some Danish lawyer who happened to be married into a Russian oligarch family. Okay? I'm not talking about coffee boy Papadopoulos. I mean some real people. And I'm not even talking about Roger Stone. I mean some real crooks, mobsters, and traitors, all rolled into, I don't know how many are there in just the Oval Office right now. Let alone the rubles that are awash throughout the whole Republican Party. Well, on the rest of the menu here, Trump has a right-wing blogger running his budget office during the shutdown. He's also, what else was he doing that's absolutely illegal? Oh, yeah, hiring 17 lawyers on the public dime. He's found 17 real lawyers to muck up the works, which also is a very similar tactic that Vlad used, let's be clear. And are there going to be experts in protocol and parliamentary procedures so they can muck up the works? Yeah, they got the whole Republican Party with them. They have decades of practice in obstruction. Nice to know. California Republicans object to Trump threatening to withhold federal wildfire aid for the state. And yeah, that's because the parts of the state that were the most devastated by wildfires are represented by the last few Republicans. There's only 7 left in the whole state representing people. And Trump is attacking their districts. I guess he doesn't like psychophancy, you would think. And the DEA, that's the Drug Enforcement Administration, smashes one of Trump's main claims about the border wall. Yeah, some ship, or I can't even remember how many pounds, but a ton of fentanyl, or hundreds and hundreds of pounds of fentanyl, was just busted in Philadelphia. That, for my reckoning, that's pretty damn far from the southern border. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where House Democrats tussle with acting AG Whitaker over his testimony date. Because he's only acting. He has to get the script. He has to commit the script to memory. Then he has to get on a stage and figure out all the blocking. And then after they get all the blocking, then actually sometimes during the blocking, they'll figure out all the lighting and where that's going to be. And then he can, give a reading. Until then, he can't give a firm date. And officials say that Joshua Tree National Park will stay open after all. Yeah, there was some report that said that the park was going to close down because, similar to Yosemite, massive destruction and unsanitary conditions. Well, they figure, since we're not inspecting our foods chain, and people are literally going to have to cook the shit out of their food, let them go to the park to do it. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is the chat room link. To the leftish of the page is our contribute button. And if you could please become a recurring Patreon to Netroots Radio, your recurring contribution keeps our lights on and helps us pay our bills. We are truly unable to do this without you. And thank you for your generosity. If you would like to, you can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. You can follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, where I can be found as Justice Putnam. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West, and we are... Also, our podcast can be found by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, YouTube, iHeart, and wherever fine podcasts can be found. All right. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes our way by way of Share Blue Media, and Lisa Needham penned this piece. Trump has been flailing throughout this entire shutdown. He's got no clear strategy of how to get past it and no understanding of how a shutdown affects people and programs. That's in part due to the fact a partisan operative, Russell Vought, is the one running the Office of Management and Budget right now. Well, thank you. Vought's experience does not include anything related to running a budget office for a nation of 325 million people and a 3.7 trillion yearly budget. Instead, Vought spent 15 years as a belligerent conservative staffer at places like Heritage Action, a wing of the hyper-partisan Heritage Foundation, and as a blogger for right-wing sites like Red State. God, I've been putting in all this time as a liberal, but they never give liberals money because we don't hate. Or we don't hate effectively. Jeez. Oh, well. He's never previously run a government agency of any size. What he has done, however, is virulently hate Muslims, saying they have a deficient theology and don't know God. Well, I would say anyone who proclaims someone else as not knowing God doesn't know God. All right, I'm just saying. He fits right in at the Trump administration, where the science advisor never studied science, where the head of housing and urban development knows nothing about housing policy, and where a reality TV star ran a major communications shop for the White House. But he's just, because he's just a partisan operative, Vought's solutions to the shutdown are threadbare. He's doing things like sending Congress a letter making the same tired demand for a wall. That letter also demanded $800 million for the humanitarian crisis at the border, a crisis of Trump's own making, by the way, and the letter contained no details as to why the administration needs the extra $5.7 billion or how that money would be spent. And I keep telling you, in a mob operation, you got to kick money up the chain. The big guy's got to get his vig. And I think $5.7 billion probably is right in the wheelhouse of Vlad's expectations. Instead of trying to get the government open, Vought is engaging in stunts designed to minimize the effects of the shutdown on Trump's base so that they won't get mad at Trump. Well, good luck with that. I mean, you got Texas ranchers already saying, we're going to fight this eminent domain takeover. And when a Texan rancher says fight, they don't mean petitioning their government for redress of grievances. They usually take direct action. And I don't mean a referendum. Vought is the perfect avatar for the whole of the Trump administration, wholly inexperienced, belligerently partisan, and utterly unconcerned about consequences. It's going to be awful hard to end a government shutdown when one party lets people like this run the show. Next offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays is Out of Reuters by Sharon Bernstein and Susan Heavey. President Donald Trump, and we never use the P word. It's not allowed by Dane and edict of the Network's radio style manual. So let me back up here again. Donald Trump lashed out once more at California yesterday for a series of devastating wildfires he blames on poor forest management and is threatening to withhold federal disaster aid in a Twitter blast that drew rebukes from lawmakers in his own party. Well, has he actually withdrawn the funds, or is he just saying this because he thinks it'll play with his base? Well, you do have a Border Patrol type whining in Florida that Trump isn't hurting the right people. The right people need to be hurt. So maybe anybody in California, even Republicans, need to be hurt. There's only 7 of them representing all of California now. Trump's tweet, the latest of several in recent months, accusing California of bringing wildfires on itself because he watches these weird right-wing news shows and InfoWars, and he thinks he knows it all. I had to actually argue with my Trump bro that it was the spotted owl's fault, and thus it was therefore the liberals' fault for all the wildfires up and down the West Coast. And I said, the spotted owl? Are we going back to the Clinton years? And I started thinking, yes, that's exactly where we are. That's about as far as their argument has gotten. Well, this also comes on the heels that Gavin Newsom took over the reins as governor of California, and Jerry Brown is going to go meditate on a hillside. At least that's what he's implying he's going to do. But Gavin Newsom has taken over, and this is just one volley in many that Trump's going to lob, because that's what he does. And he's also hoping it takes the news cycle away from what is really coming down, and that's the fact that this guy, maybe he's going to make a deal. I don't know. But a lot of times people in his position go to jail. And I'm not talking just about treason. Because when you steal money from rich people, there is no forgiving that. Of the Independent Media Institute brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Trump attempts to make his case for the wall on the U.S.-Mexico border, and one of his selling points is that the wall would reduce the flow of illicit drugs into the country. But his own Drug Enforcement Administration know better, and its 2018 National Drug Threat Assessment, released just 2 months ago, makes clear that at best Trump is uninformed, and at worst that he is lying to the American people. Well, it can be both. Remember drugs. The drugs are pouring into this country. They don't go through the ports of entry. When they do, they sometimes get caught, Trump claimed at a Rose Garden conference last Friday. It's not a new claim for Trump. It's been a pillar of his claim that there is a crisis on the border. But repeating a false claim doesn't make it any less false. What is true, as the DEA reports, is that the southwest border remains the primary entry point for heroin in the United States, but it is not being lugged across the desert via a wall-less border. According to the DEA, the majority of the flow is through privately owned vehicles that are entering the United States at legal ports of entry, followed by tractor trailers where the heroin is commingled with legal goods. Body carriers represent a smaller percentage of movement of heroin, and they typically smuggle amounts ranging from 3 to 6 pounds taped to their torso or in their shoes and backpacks. To be clear, the body carriers the DEA is talking about are people coming through ports of entry, not across an open border. And the agency reported that only a small percentage of all heroin seized along the border was seized between points of entry. Now, it's the same thing with fentanyl. According to the DEA, which says fentanyl imports are split between China and Mexico, Mexican drug traffickers most commonly smuggle multi-kilogram loads of fentanyl concealed in privately owned vehicles before trafficking the drugs through southwest border points of entry. Now, San Diego saw the biggest fentanyl seizures. 74% of seizures were from cars at ports of entry, and the Tucson sector, which had the next highest fentanyl seizure numbers, the figure was 91%. Now, of course, this is before the Philadelphia bust. I wonder if those numbers are going to get skewed. Claiming that building a border wall would reduce the flow of drugs into the country is probably not the biggest lie Trump and his allies have told about the wall, but it is patently false. Because, let's be clear, yeah, we're getting fentanyl from Mexico and China. But the fentanyl, among other drugs that people are dying from, come from the pharmaceutical companies. No one talks about building a wall around them now, do they? Let's get on to our break, and when we come back from said break, we will go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to Network netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, A Tale of Two Queens. Few historical figures are as romanticized as Mary Stuart, the tragic 16th century Queen of Scotland. Mary, known for her terrible taste in men and being quite the looker compared to her English cousin Elizabeth, is now the subject of a film, Mary Queen of Scots. Written by Beau Willimon from the Netflix series House of Cards, this is fitting because ultimately Mary was a politician, and it was a series of bad decisions that led to her demise at the hands of Elizabeth. Specifically, Mary was accused of supporting a plot to overthrow Elizabeth, which would have made Mary the monarch of both England and Scotland. Told in flashback from her execution day, the film shows the newly widowed teenage Mary, played by Saoirse Ronan, returning to Scotland from France to take her rightful place as queen. However, as she soon learns, the idea of a woman in power doesn't sit well with everyone. Meanwhile, to the south in England, Elizabeth, played by Margot Robbie, is also unhappy with Mary because she's Catholic and has a perhaps more legitimate claim to the throne than Elizabeth. While Elizabeth's authority may be more easily recognized, it is still clear that, much like in Mary's court, it's the men who are really in charge. The film takes liberties with history and raises the question of what it might have been like had the women actually exercised the power they supposedly had. Perhaps the biggest liberty the film takes is the climactic meeting of the two rivals, filled amidst shrouds, perhaps acknowledging the near certainty that the two never met. The scene does, however, bring the actual historical conflict into focus and is a showcase for the acting talent of Ronan and Robbie, making the otherwise forgettable Mary Queen of Scots memorable. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata.
When wildfires rip through a landscape, firefighters have the first and most immediate job. But then, that burned moonscape often passes into the hands of restoration ecologists, who yank out invasive species and plant native seedlings in their place.
And we try to artificially give a start to these communities that should resemble the communities that were there prior to the disturbance.
Matteo Garbellato, a plant pathologist at UC Berkeley. The problem, he says, is that microscopic killers sometimes hitchhike on native seedlings grown in nurseries, and that's happened at restoration sites in the San Francisco Bay Area, where restorers hoped that nursery-grown natives called toyones and sticky monkey flowers could be reintroduced.
Plant ecologists were looking at them and thinking, oh, why are these toyons dying here? Or why are these sticky monkey flowers dying in large numbers in this restoration site? So it happens that each one of those plant species was reintroduced in a restoration effort, and it had one or sometimes multiple of these pathogens that belong to the genus Phytophthora, which incidentally is the same genus of the pathogen that causes sudden death, and it's also the same genus of the pathogen that caused the Irish potato famine.
Garbellato and his colleagues surveyed 5 native plant nurseries for the Phytophthora pathogen and found that more than a quarter of the plants sampled were infected. They also discovered in separate work that a common chemical used to suppress the pathogen in nurseries can actually breed resistance.
The passage of these strains through these production facilities, sometimes it can make them more aggressive.
They reported their work in the journals PLOS ONE and Plant Pathology. But there is a solution to root out these invisible killers. A year-long regimen of stricter sanitation at native plant nurseries, like pasteurizing pots and soil, appeared to eliminate the pathogen. And disease-free seedlings means damaged landscapes have a better chance at bouncing back.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com,
Show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Can you be arrested for being mean to the police on the internet?
I'm Baratunde Thurston from The Onion, and also, mother. You're listening to the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
Recently, the Exeter, New Hampshire police arrested a local man for writing a comment on a news website that accused the police chief of covering up for a corrupt officer. That statement allegedly violated New Hampshire's criminal defamation law that makes it a misdemeanor to intentionally and falsely disparage another person. New Hampshire's criminal defamation law, along with others like it in 24 additional states, in essence, makes it a crime to say mean things about people. Now, to be sure, freedom of speech does not give anyone the absolute right to spread lies about a fellow citizen, which is why civil remedies are available. But criminal defamation laws are another story. First, you shouldn't go to jail for saying something mean about somebody. And second, the laws chill speech. And third, they are disproportionately used against people who criticize the police or politicians. Fortunately, the criminal case in New Hampshire has been dismissed, and the ACLU has sued in New Hampshire federal court to have that state's criminal defamation law struck down as violating the First Amendment.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
The Wednesday meeting at the White House to negotiate an end to the government shutdown ended abruptly after Nancy Pelosi reiterated that the Democrats would not provide funding for Trump's border wall. Following the aborted meeting, Pelosi and Schumer stepped up to the microphones.
And he said, if I open up the government, you won't do what I want. That's cruel. That's callous. And that's using millions of innocent people as sort of pawns. And it was wrong. And then a few minutes later, he sort of slammed the table. And when Leader Pelosi said she didn't agree with the wall, he just walked out and said, we have nothing to discuss. So he said it was a waste of his time. Again, we saw a temper tantrum because he couldn't get his way, and he just walked out of the meeting.
Many federal workers will not be receiving their paychecks, and what that means in their lives is tragic in terms of their credit rating, paying their mortgage, paying their rent, paying their car payment, paying their children's tuition, and the rest. The president seems to be insensitive to that. He thinks maybe they could just ask their father for more money, but they can't.
Then it was the Republicans' turn, with Vice President Mike Pence doubling down on Trump's position.
When the Speaker of the House comes to the table with the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, after we've made days of good faith negotiation with an offer on the table, and their only answer is they will not negotiate until we reopen the government. And when the president says, well, if I gave you exactly what you're asking for, would you agree to border security and a wall? And they say no. I think the American people deserve better, and I can promise the American people this president, Republicans in the House and the Senate, are going to continue to stand firm until we get the resources and the reforms necessary to end the humanitarian crisis on our southern border, to end the security crisis on our southern border. Then and only then will we end this partial government shutdown.
The House on Wednesday voted to reopen the Treasury Department, IRS, Small Business Administration, and several other federal agencies. 8 Republicans voted with Democrats to pass the legislation, the first of several small spending bills Pelosi plans to bring up this week. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has no intention of bringing it up for a vote, even as some in his caucus challenged the president over his shutdown strategy at a closed-door meeting. Instead, Trump continues to threaten that he'll declare a national emergency, which would ostensibly give him the power to redirect money from the military to spend on a border wall.
I have the absolute right to do national emergency if I want.
What's your threshold for
My threshold will be if I can't make a deal with people that are unreasonable.
Meanwhile, Trump heads to McAllen, Texas on Thursday to visit the southern border. In an off-the-record lunch meeting with network anchors Tuesday afternoon, Trump reportedly said of the trip, quote, "It's not going to change a damn thing, but I'm still doing it," adding that the trip was simply for publicity. On Friday, the shutdown officially becomes the longest shutdown in American history. It's also the day that thousands of federal employees will not get their paychecks. One thing Trump's tantrum over the wall is succeeding at is keeping news from the Mueller probe off the front burners. But there has been significant news on that front over the past few days. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who appointed Special Counsel Robert Mueller and has been overseeing the Russia investigation, is planning to leave the Justice Department shortly after a new Attorney General, presumably Trump's nominee William Barr, is confirmed. A poorly redacted court filing from Paul Manafort revealed new details about what Special Counsel Robert Mueller is investigating, including that Manafort had shared polling data related to Trump's presidential campaign with an associate tied to Russian intelligence. Incredibly, over at Fox, Shepard Smith and Judge Andrew Napolitano agreed that Trump is guilty of collusion.
The prosecutors accused Paul Manafort of lying to FBI agents in violation of his guilty plea to cooperate with them. And they filed their allegations of the lies under seal. We don't know what they were. Paul Manafort's lawyers filed their answer, and they forgot to seal part of it. And the part they forgot to seal was that the FBI accused Paul Manafort of lying about whether or not he gave confidential campaign polling data at the height of the campaign to a Russian oligarch who the FBI has identified as a source for Russian intelligence.
So a Putin man.
Yes. This shows that Bob Mueller can demonstrate to a court, without the testimony of Paul Manafort, that the campaign had a connection to Russian intelligence, and the connection involved information going from the campaign to the Russians. The question is, was this in return for a promise of something from the Russians, and did the candidate, now the president, know about it?
And would that be conspiracy?
Yes. A conspiracy is an agreement to commit a crime. The crime would be to receive something of value from a foreign person or government during a campaign.
Well, if this is collusion, though collusion isn't a crime, this would be collusion.
The crime is conspiracy, the agreement. Collusion is a non-legal term.
Oh, I know. But right. If there's a collusion giving stuff to the Russians about polling data,
would
that
probably fit into that kind of a category.
Yeah.
And that's a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I really can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 Minutes. Campaigners calling for a second Brexit referendum made their case in a new report on Wednesday, arguing that with lawmakers deadlocked on a Brexit deal just months ahead of Britain's EU departure, voters should get another chance to make their preferences known. Matthew Goodwin is a professor of politics at the University of Kent.
If you look at the House of Commons, there doesn't appear to be a majority currently for any particular outcome.
That goes for Prime Minister Theresa May's current Brexit deal, the prospect of a no-deal Brexit, a softer Brexit deal known as the Norway option, or for calling a second referendum. That could change if Brexit Day nears and nervous lawmakers think another public vote could bail them out. Executed poorly, though, that vote could actually make things worse. Akash Pown is a senior fellow at the Institute for Government, a London think tank.
If you just had a straightforward repetition of the 2016 referendum question, if the result was another vote in favour of leave, it still wouldn't necessarily resolve the current political deadlock that we face, because there is no agreement on what Brexit should look like.
There are some creative alternatives, like a two-question referendum, in which voters chose again whether to leave the EU and if so, how to do it, or a vote that rated different Brexit options in order of preference. But Goodwin worries even those options ignore the reality of Brexit, that it's not just the politicians who are divided, but the public too.
We're not seeing that outbreak of mass regret that many predicted.
And were Brexit to be defeated by the narrowest of margins in a second vote, possibly on lower turnout, the crisis in confidence in the British government could make the current Brexit mess look tidy by comparison.
I think any attempt to go back to the country, have a second referendum, possibly overturn the vote to leave the European Union would create a political and constitutional crisis in British politics.
Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. And we carry that theme here from the Bistro Cafe right back into the chef's table for these amuse-bouche. And the first one being weather from around the world. And we always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River. In the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 41 degrees Fahrenheit, and it's going to be about the same temperature topping out today. I got to tell you, they don't call this region of Oregon the Banana Belt for nothing. It's going to be about 57 to 58 degrees today. And I should mention that in previous weather reports, I was drawing information from a weather station on property about a good 7 miles away. This property is less than a quarter of a mile away, though they're about 300 feet up in elevation above us. So taking that into account, it's much closer, though they're about 300 feet higher. But nonetheless, these are much more accurate readings for where the mothership resides. We're going to have a low in, it looks like the low 40s, upper 30s, and highs will remain for the next, through the weekend, it looks like mid to upper 50s. And we're going to have quite a bit of sun today, somewhat cloudy tonight, and cloudy tomorrow, but it looks like Saturday and Sunday will have quite a bit of sun, which I'm looking forward to. My two granddaughters are coming to visit. My grandson is in college, so he's studying away, or at least he better. But I'm going to visit with my granddaughters today. My ex is bringing them down. And I should mention, because our son was our son, my ex has remained close to our family. And in spite of whatever problems we had when we were younger, we remained steadfast in being parents to our son. And that meant not getting divorced from families. I mean, do people do that? Yeah, I think sometimes they do. Because they use their kids and their families as rope in a tug-of-war. And my ex and I decided not to do that. So it will be lovely to visit with my granddaughters and in this time. And it's going to be nice having nice weather, too. So, I don't know, maybe we'll have a barbecue. All right, it looks like winds right now are out of the south-southeast about 2 miles per hour. They will shift out of the southeast in about an hour or so and get up to their usual clip of 5 to 10 miles per hour, as it is wont at this time of year. Actually, that's a clip that is pretty common throughout the year because of the pinched valley that I'm in. And it looks like it'll be either out of the southeast or east-southeast, shifting back and forth between that for the next several days through the weekend at 5 to 10 miles per hour, calm in the mornings, picking up through the day, of course. And then on Tuesday, we have a big storm coming in with not less than a quarter inch of rain a day. And I've got 5 days out there in the future that they're forecasting. And I'm looking at the water cell headed our way. Yeah, I believe it. Right now, barometric pressure is holding steady at 29.86 inches. Visibility is down to 4 miles. And relative humidity is at 91%. So we might not have rain, but it's not going to be so dry, will it now? Okay, weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. And these people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Even the guy here, or gal, here in the Rogue River Valley, right here near the hamlet of Rogue River. They got their own little personal weather station, and they're hooked up too. London is 41 degrees with a rain shower. Paris is 42 and partly cloudy. Rome is 47 and fair with a wind advisory. Kiev is 19 degrees with light snow. Kabul is 28 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong, 64 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 34 and clear with a frost and freezing advisory. Sydney, Australia is 71 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 50 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is 34 degrees Fahrenheit, mostly cloudy, and you still have gale force winds as not only a warning, but you have them. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. To point out here at the onset that it is always heartening to believe that our institutions may be a bulwark against this, for want of a better term, this takeover, this war against America, waged by a hostile foreign power with the collusion of active participants in government right now. I hold within my hands a list. I literally do. And we're not lying. I mean, where's the money? Where's the money coming from? We can figure it out and have. But it is heartening to consider that our institutional legacy is putting a stop, or at least, I mean, look, the lines are being drawn, and this mobster trader is finally figuring out what the law really is. Yeah. Did you know that walking out, slamming his hands down on the table and walking out of negotiations is a trademark Trump strategy? Apparently, it rattled two of his divorce lawyers that were representing two of his wives, enough that they were rattled. Why? He's not going to come back? Well, fine. Screw him. All right. This is by Sarah N. Lynch out of Reuters. And Democrats in the U.S. House of Representatives are locked in a dispute with Acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker over scheduling a date for him to testify to lawmakers amid concerns about his appointment by Donald Trump. Yeah, you know, get this guy in with no confirmation process. That's always a good one. And then have this guy read into the investigation and come a-running. How about Barr? He's going to be read into the investigation too. Is he going to be consulting with the guy in the Oval Office as a personal attorney rather than the Attorney General for the United States? House Judiciary Committee Chairman Gerald Nadler said after Democrats won the House majority in November's elections that Whitaker would be his first witness. Some Democrats are concerned that Whitaker's appointment to replace ousted Attorney General Jeff Sessions violated the U.S. Constitution and represented an effort to undermine Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. election and possible coordination with Trump campaign members. What do you mean possible, Sarah? Trump denies campaign collusion with Moscow because they were really in Odessa. According to Nadler, Whitaker agreed in November that he would appear for a hearing in January. But Nadler said yesterday that the Department of Justice was now trying to cite the partial government shutdown as the reason to delay Whitaker's testimony until, I don't know, maybe Valentine's Day. I love you. Telling the committee he would need at least 2 weeks removed from a partial government shutdown before he could appear. Well, Nadler wrote a letter to Whitaker simply stating, "I cannot accept your proposal. We are willing to work with you to identify a mutually identifiable date for your testimony, but we will not allow that date to slip past January 29th of 2019, the day of Trump's scheduled address to Congress, when we know you will be in Washington." Yeah, I love how they can't meet with the House committee, but he has plenty of time to meet with every Republican to say, look, you got rubles in your coffers? Let's figure a way to launder it so they won't find out so quick. They're going to find out. But maybe not so quick.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Dan Whitcomb, also of Reuters, brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits, Thursdays. Yes, we got to have our daily portion of grits, as the Lord intended. Joshua Tree National Park will stay open during the partial U.S. government shutdown, officials said yesterday, reversing an announcement earlier this week that the famed desert preserve in California would close because of sanitation issues and damage. Do not damage this national monument. I know it is Joshua Tree National Monument, which I thought was a higher designation than park, even though you could go there and treat it like a park, and we did. And I used to take Israel when he was just a small guy, and we would camp around Jumbo Rocks. That's a great little vista that when you get to the top of those. Gets cold at night, so be forewarned. It is the desert, but it'll be freezing at night. So get those mummy bags with the down. They really help. Back to this article, the park will also bring on additional staff to ensure the protection of park resources and mitigate some of the damage that has occurred during the lapse of appropriations. U.S. national parks have not been given a blanket order to close during the budget showdown, which is now in its 19th day. I guess maybe it's actually its 20th at this point. That has hit a broad swath of the U.S. government. Some parks have been closed due to the public because of lack of staffing, while others have kept gates open but were not providing any staff or services. So then people like in Yosemite were then, taking a dump right along the road. Stop doing that. And maybe the government should be opened and Trump and his mobsters can negotiate like they're used to. Okay, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but Netroots Radio, of course, broadcasts on. We'll meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, and boy, do we need those French 77s. Well, I do. And so do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here, right here tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pas fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte coeur. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.